Hey guys, I'm Taylor Ann, and today I'm going to show you how to put a print on a large slate. If you bought one of our do-it-yourself large slate kits, you know you got one of these little goodies with it, and you got a large slate. And here's like a little example that I've already done. And so I'm going to show you tricks that are easier to go off of rather than the instructions, just because there are some tricks with Mod Podging and with putting strings on the slate. So the first thing that you do with the instructions is you have to print out your picture on a just regular matte paper. When you do that, let the ink dry really well. I personally let it dry like overnight. For some reason, it just helps it from bleeding when you Mod Podge it and get it wet. Next step is ripping your paper. So I just printed a picture, easy to rip, that is on a whole 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And I'm going to rip it to fit on my slate. So what I do is when I rip, yes, there's a technique to ripping paper. I know that sounds crazy, but I always rip the paper with the edges ripping away. The reason why is when you rip it forward, you get that white edge, and we don't want that. So rip your paper away like so. I'm gonna rip my picture to fit my slate. It's just easier to do that. So I'm ripping away. And so on. If you have a like really small area to rip, you just go a little slower, and honestly, slow and steady wins the race, and you'll be able to do a straight rip. I like the jagged edge look. It just kind of goes with the jagged edges of the slate. You can kind of see here. This slate's missing a hole that we haven't put yet. I'm just using it for a demonstration. Then your kit came with a brush. It either came with a brush like this. Most of the large slate kits come with larger bristled brushes. And then the other kits come with just a foam brush. Either one works well. And then the large slate kits come with 2 Mod Podges. You're not necessarily going to need all of that Mod Podge. I just like to give you extra. Maybe later on you want to go add a layer just for extra protection. And so I just, the more the merrier. With a damp brush, I like to dry it off really well. I mean, just to kind of absorb the water out of it. You do always want to Mod Podge with a damp brush. Otherwise, it will like kind of really roughen up your paper. So with a little water, kind of dap it on the paper towel. I'm gonna put it into my Mod Podge, and I'm gonna do a good layer of Mod Podge on my slates where my picture is going to go. So you want to cover the whole area. You do not want to flood your slate with Mod Podge. This is actually a thin layer. If you put too much Mod Podge, it will actually start to bubble and stuff, because it's hard to push out bubbles with thick paste underneath the paper. So I start with a really thin layer, and then I press my paper on however I want it centered. And then once I do that, I like to press it really quickly with my hand. Yes, your hands will get a little dirty doing this, full of Mod Podge. And then I just dip it in Mod Podge again and do a thin layer over. You can even kind of dampen it a little bit. So the thing is you kind of have to work quickly. And my tips are, I always do a cross method, and then I do a star. And so the trick is you don't want to overpaint. So I did like a cross, and then I did a star. And yes, your inks will start to look a little different just because you're wetting the paper. So I like to kind of dab that ink off of my brush a little bit so I don't spread it, and just keep doing that star motion. Again, working out bubbles. You have to do the cross again. Then I keep doing the star. And again, wipe my brush. It's just kind of repetitive, and you also do not want to overpaint one area. What will happen is it will kind of fade that part of the picture. So, which it also helps with like a slightly damped brush. and you just work out some of the bubbles. Sometimes the brush just doesn't help you much, so I don't really have any big bubbles, but I'm gonna just go ahead and show you. Oh look, there's one kind of. If I like to use my finger, if you don't want to do this, that's fine, just keep doing the star motion. I just think that sometimes you can kind of feel where the bubbles are. So the thing with these slates is they have texture to them. They're kind of rugged, so sometimes you don't know what's a bubble and what's a groove into the slate. So I like to just take my fingers. No, it's kind of messy, but I guess that's the fun part about art. You can kind of make a mess. That's why I have drop cloth down. You just never know. So you can just keep going with your fingers and your brush. Again, I see some bubbles. I'm going to push them out. When you push out bubbles too, if you use your hands, never run a finger over semi-dried Mod Podge. It will rip the paper. So I know this is kind of weird, but sometimes I'll even like put a little bit of water on my fingers and then work into the paper that way. So it just helps preventing the paper from ripping, because your fingers can like stick to the Mod Podge. It's kind of weird. And then you can kind of see the ink. That's just part of it. It dries completely fine. You just don't want to over paint in any particular area, especially on like faces and important details. That will fade it. And so after you kind of have it on there, it's really smooth, you like it. If it starts to dry and you see a bubble, no big deal. Wet your fingers with some water and even some Mod Podge or the brush if you don't like to get your fingers dirty, and just kind of work out the bubble. So now I'm going to do all of the edges. You want to blend in the Mod Podge on the edges, so when it's dry you won't see like where you stopped, and it gives the slate extra protection. And again, this is why I give you extra Mod Podge, because it can also come in handy later on when if you want to add like another layer just to have for protection on your slate. Basically like a varnish, a covering, a protection. Doesn't hurt. It helps prevent the edges from chipping of the slates. And so there you go. We're gonna let this dry, and then once we let this dry, I'll show you how to do the string on the slate. Okay, so I'm going to show you now how to put the string on the large slates. So this one's dry. This is one that I did earlier, and each kit comes with a string. So the easiest way to do this is to lay your slate down flat, and you're going to take your string from the back of it and poke it on each side through each of the holes. So it's going to kind of look like this in the back and like this in the front. When you lay down your slate, you want to make the strings even. It depends how you want it. If you want your string showing when you hang it, then have it a little higher. If you want your string hidden, that's how I like mine, so you can have it a little lower. You can always adjust your string, and I'll show you how. If you have it a little long, you can always make this part shorter. So next we're going to tie. So I'll show you just a regular on the back, did a regular loop through like you're going to tie your shoe, and then I'm going to do another one. You want it pretty tight against the hole of the slate. This is like a double knot right here, and so on. Then I'll do the other side. Okay, so if your slate is still a little longer than you wanted, no worries. What you do is you just keep tying a knot, and the more knots you tie, the shorter it will make it. It's just simple loop throughs and so on, and you can just keep doing it. And again, if you want your string longer, just untie some knots. And there you go. You have a tied slate ready for the wall. Okay guys, so the slate is dry and the print is on there, and I just want to show you the finished product. This one is actually not done though. We still have to add the hole and then put a string on this particular slate. You would not have a large slate in your kit that needed a hole, but I just wanted to show you how to Mod Podge a print on the large slate with all of the tricks that I particularly use. I did add a little finishing touch to this one. This is not included in your kit. If you want to add something fun and extra, I'm actually known for adding the gold touches to the slates, and I draw on every single one of my prints. But I use the Sharpie brand paint pen. It has to be oil based. It applies better onto the slates, and the water-based inks don't look as good, nor do they stay. So this particular one, I just scratched the edges like I do to all of my regular prints on slate. And then I personalized the bottom. This is an old picture, and I just personalized it to add something extra. So that is also an option as well. So thank you for watching. Good luck to y'all and your New Orleans roofing slates. The Mod Podge tricks also apply to our coasters and ornaments as well. So thank you for watching and have a good one.